for c5, and we are going to see another... No,
hoping for Queen A5.
Not another Queen A5, because you remember yesterday the game of
something
Carlsen.
A little more normal today.
Yeah, now he's actually showing perhaps what he had in mind for the match against Fabiano Caruana in the c3 Sicilian.
So a few options here. Chosen the main line, which is d6. d6, of course, another variation. Now in this position, both knight b6 and e6 are moves. There you go, knight b6.
Going back to b5, also the main line. On e5,
by far the main line to take on e5, but other possibilities are still there.
Things like this, and then you end up eventually taking back on c6 with a pawn, which is by no means weaker than the one on d4, and usually this is a rather quiet game, but actually there are a few things that black needs to remember, because usually the queen, I'm not sure about the exact move order, if they take first with the bishop here, but I think at some point the white queen lands on g4. I'm not really sure if it's like this, lands on g4, and you have a small problem to solve here. That's the thing on g7. That's a long way to go until there. Magnus Carlsen taking his time after bishop b5. He hasn't taken yet.
That's a weird thing about switching to the Sicilian. It's not so much the main line sometimes, but it's the sidelines that you have to now remember as a Sicilian player, that perhaps you weren't as sharp because you hadn't prepared them as much. It is played with bishop d7. There is a couple of ways to play against bishop d7. He does play with e takes d6. e6 is actually an interesting variation, but it doesn't quite work.
I was going to mention that white can actually also play e6, but now he's getting this typical pawn structure, because it seems unlikely that white will be able to keep that pawn on d6.
So if white really tries hard to keep that pawn on d6 with a move like bishop f4?
Well, there might be a trick with knight d5, hitting the bishop.
And queen a5 check.
Queen a5 is looming as well, so that you might have to take on c6 at some point, but you're not sure you really want to do this.
And then you just take on, you can even take with the bishop and recapture on d6.
Yeah, d6 will be eventually, so bishop f4, probably not the most accurate here. But now it's Karjakin's turn to think. An interesting
You could also
choice.
provoke black to play a move like f6 with a move like bishop g5 first. My idea is that if you play queen c8, he's gone bishop g5. So the point is that if you go queen c8, I can perhaps come back bishop f4, because now knight d5 doesn't have the same venom in it, because you don't have queen a5.
True, you're right, yeah. Well, maybe it could be wise to move that queen, maybe to e8.
He's gone f6, and that's the provocation that Karjakin was looking for.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's say Carlsen has taken a little bit of time, not too much either. It's an open question whether he's still in his prep, or whether he just plays the way he feels like it. Bishop h4 comes, bishop takes d6. But it's true that this move f6 has created a slight weakness on the king side, knight c3, and I believe it is now crucial for white to keep this bishop, keep this light squared bishop e5, not to exchange it, but perhaps try and bring it back somewhere to d3 and try and exert some pressure on this diagonal.
Exactly. And exactly against that, Magnus has gone for knight b4, trying to trade off this bishop, which could be very dangerous if black wants to go shot castle.
Exactly, knight b4. And again, I think he should keep the bishop and perhaps just modestly go back to e2, bearing in mind that at some point the knight b4 will have to go, and then the bishop will go back to d3. Oh, he has left the bishop, proved me wrong with his castle here.
I still think white has a very pleasant position because of this f6 provocation, and now the e6 pawn will always be forever weak. It's just easier to play with white.
Exactly. I mean, I was mentioning that it might be wiser to keep the bishop, but exchanging them also has a plus point for white, that e6 has been weakened because of f6. So the exchange also makes a lot
Queen
of sense.
b3, eyeing the e6 pawn, so now you can't take on b5 because of the intermezzo of queen e6 check.
Let me show this. Exactly. Check, king moves, and only then regaining this bishop. That wouldn't be a good deal for the world champion, so he is certainly not going to take here.
Looks like a very pleasant position, Yannick, for white. Rook e8 in the air now.
I think he's played it, yes. Well, it's indeed quite typical for these IQP, where you have the isolated queen pawn on d4. At the moment, it looks pleasant for white. He has activity. There is indeed that slight weakness on e6 as well. But in the long term, it's actually black who has the, let's say, the trumps in the long term because of this square on d5. I mean, that could be especially the case after the exchange of the bishops, the light squared bishops. Now Karjakin offering the trade of the other bishops as well with bishop g3. Personally, I think black is absolutely safe here. Perhaps his idea is to take the knight, actually. If the bishop takes g3, he might want to take the knight on b4. That could be actually a good deal for...
a good exchange?
For white, exactly. Because these knights in this pawn structure, they really want to take control of d5 and occupy this square. Make sure that the pawn on d4 is a permanent weakness, that it cannot go forward.
Decided to take on b5 instead. And now the question for Sergey, does he want to take on b4 or does he want to take on g3? Both have their pluses and minuses. I do agree, Yannick. I like your idea of taking the knight instead of the bishop. Yes, there will be one knight on, and he does it. There will be one knight on d5, but I can challenge it eventually. And this bishop, it's not the piece that you want when you're playing against the IQP.
He's going knight d5, a tempo on the queen, before deciding on where to go with the bishop g3.
Queen b3, and bishop retreats back all the way to c7.
To c7, yeah. It was also interesting perhaps to try and put it on f4 in order to control this square. But
perhaps he wants the square f4 for the knight, so that when you go knight c3, he can jump to f4 with the knight. So he's gone knight c3 in
he's
fact.
hungry for mate. So knight f4 followed by mate somewhere.
It's a quiet approach from Sergey. Much more sedate than what he did in the rapid. I think this makes a lot more sense. Fabiano Caruana said it himself. People need to stop giving Carlsen these points. And he just plays normal chess. He's quiet, solid, doesn't go for the throw, doesn't go for pawns he doesn't need to. He just solidifies his position. Perhaps black's still doing okay, but Sergey playing much more sensible chess in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean this position is about equal, we could imagine now. Well, if he exchanges on d5, maybe slightly early, he hasn't done it, he's played g3. Well, I wanted to say that if he takes, he wants to take with the queen, and then there is a risk to end up with a rook and bishop against...
slightly worse ending.
Slightly worse ending, but this is not happening, not yet at least. g3, and he takes on c3. He wants to go queen d5. Well,
so he will take with
and you can see that...
Why is he thinking about rook e6?
e6, of course. Rook
Interesting.
e6 is an option here. But isn't there something like queen d5?
But then you just take on e8 and take on c3, right?
Yeah,
that would be an extra pawn. I think you actually have to take on e6 and take on c3.
Take queen c3, because
or
even pawn takes c3 is possible.
But then the knight is...
no, you're pinned.
I'm pinned.
So just take with the pawn and your d4. I think this is...
better.
No, that's just an extra pawn. I think if Sergey decides to take on e6 in this variation, he probably should just, and he does, I think he should just capture on e6 and move his king, take advantage of the fact that the pawn on c3 is undefended at the end. They go exactly for that variation. A little bit surprised he put the king on f8. I guess maybe not that surprised. On h8 it also would be kind of vulnerable. This king, in classical chess, perhaps it's not a real issue, but...
this can be dangerous for black.
Yeah.
With
the other hand,
I personally think that black is okay, but...
Sergey's down on time significantly.
Something maybe like...
over a minute. So he's gone king g2?
He has to try and exchange queens. Black has to try and exchange queens. That's the main issue, because the king could be weak.
Yeah, one more move. Like, get the rook to e1.
Yeah.
So move like queen e7 here?
I think he wants to play queen f5.
Queen e7
He's gone for queen e8?
Queen e8 has been played, and then...
Queen e8, I thought
so he wants to go queen c6 as well.
Queen f5 played as you predicted, Yannick. A nice move, attacking the pawn. It's a nice tempo.
He's going to go queen c6 now, just making sure that knight is stuck on f3.
I don't like queen c6 so much. There's
because of
five
d5.
ideas.
Yeah.
Although perhaps then even for
start.
c5.
Yeah, queen c5 would be very I would be very happy to get queen c5 then. He's gone queen g6, insisting.
We've been focused so much on the position that we've slightly neglected the time, but slightly less than 50 seconds for Karjakin, 1:18 for Carlsen. It's quite something at the moment, and Karjakin deep in thought, but he needs to move.
All endgames would be better for black.
Yes,
So
definitely.
he has to make sure that he keeps the pressure going.
Absolutely, you just cannot trade queens in this position. This king on f8, it's begging to be attacked. You want to keep that material.
He needs to do that quickly.
But I'm surprised he didn't play queen d5 faster.
He's on queen d5.
Why is he taking so long in this position?
We don't have the right time.
No, we can see that.
Queen f7, queen
No, the time is
d6,
accurate for sure.
and he repeats.
He'll be happy to repeat with the amount of time that he has.
That's Magnus says
Wants to play
no way. Queen f4 is coming.
And of course, you have to be careful about moves like queen d5 after this. If you go queen d8 check, king
But
g7.
it is dangerous for both sides. This happened to him against Maxime. He had a better position, his king wasn't safe, and he overpressed. He needs to make sure not to do the exact same mistake. His king on g7, it's not being threatened immediately, but it's never going to get better.
And with the rook on e1 and rook, he has to go rook c7, defending the
wise.
7th rank.
It's very wise. And queen d5. He wanted to get that queen on this central square.
And
but
rook e4 with the idea of queen e3.
That seems a bit clumsy to me, but I think at some point h4 is going to come to the position. White doesn't really want. There you go,
Gone for
h4.
it.
But
Exactly.
you see, that's Karjakin. Even so low on time, he keeps things under control. And that's why he's so good at blitz.
Right.
He knows where to put his pieces. He feels that. And he's now going to e8. Not sure this is going to cause any serious trouble to Carlsen, who plays a quiet, solid move
Maybe he
a6.
could try to get queen c3, queen c8 in as well.
Magnus is showing his cards. He wants to play b5, b4, push that pawn, say, look, I have a bishop, it controls b8. You have to worry
6
about this
seconds on
fast
the
pawn.
Rook d8, that's also clever.
This spin is annoying. Not really sure if fast. Oh, queen e8. I'm not sure queen e8 is a threat. Because I do have queen takes f3, then you have queen g8. Oh, well, it's very tricky. Messy, yeah. With only seconds on the clock, this is anybody's game.
But it makes sense to try and free this bishop somehow, maybe queen c6. But he must, well, queen c6, h5, that's probably what was worrying him.
And there's no increment, so
Wow.
Surviving on the delay.
very careful about the delay.
But this is really getting tricky for Magnus now, because this move h5,
Threatens h6 to the
mate, threatening mate, bishop f8, and he's also down to like,
But how do you defend? This is so uncomfortable. This spin is permanent.
could actually
3 seconds, make a move, 92.
d5 I thought was very strong.
And now he's down to 5 seconds on his clock.
Well,
He has to maintain that 5 seconds.
was he lost at
But
some
how
point?
did he get to 5 seconds?
Because it's a 3-second increment.
3 seconds.
Oh, sorry, delay.
Delay,
3-second
right.
delay.
Surviving on 3 seconds is so tough in this position.
Carlsen.
Even the trade.
Oh my. What?
Well,
Oh,
very-
queen f6. Does this work?
But does it? There's no check.
There's no check.
yeah, but the king situation is still, well,
But was that really necessary?
and maybe
I don't see
queen
why
f7.
I gave up my. This doesn't seem like
No.
enough.
I
This
think he just
seems-
missed king g8.
Now he's going for the mate.
And he's going to
And
take.
that's it?
Oh, g5 is such a
Oh,
nice
so
move. He
pragmatic.
opens the position, and that king on h2, no
Check.
way it survives.
Check and queen takes f4 is not
Make a
possible.
No, that endgame is just lost. I can pick up h6. I get rid of my problems.
He's lost.
He's
The
completely
Russian
lost.
is lost.
He gave up that rook for no reason.
Well, it looked, oh,
No, but this is just lower.
with the
H
knight
pawn.
The h pawn is just easy win.
It's going to be.
Yeah, we put the rook on g4. You bring up the king. That's gonna be game over. Why did he give up the rook? This reminds me of Topalov against. I mean, like, why? Why did you take that bishop?
Yeah, it was not that critical, but
So king
In
can't
a
take
way,
on d6
yeah,
because of knight e4.
Yeah, but okay, I can simply play my king to e7, attacks the knight.
e4 still.
Take with the rook. Don't fall for it.
But what about the
How
pawn
are you
now?
going to
Yeah,
no,
with this
that's-
rook d5? My king is
with the king on h4, it would be good.
a different story.
And that's
That's
it.